So, how do I put this the right way? Rightness and righteousness is woven into the heart of human beings. Let me put it another way that I think many of you will understand. There are times when I need to get a few things out of the house. I need to get dinner on the table. Um, and I need to feed the littlest baby while I'm getting dinner on the table, so we can have kind of a normal time at dinner where I can stay focused on the kids. So to get that done, I need the kids to go in their room and play for a little bit and not kill each other while I do that. And literally every single time, maybe not every single time, but at least 90% of the time, when I bring my kids to the room um, and maybe this is too much to say, I've turned the locks on my doors to their bedrooms around because sometimes I gotta get stuff done. So I'm gonna press lock on that door. I'm gonna close it, and it's gonna be brother time, and y'all just need to figure out life on your own. But nevertheless, I'll put them in that room. I'll lock the door. I'll say, "Hey, it's brother time. Y'all gonna play in there for a little bit." I'll get started in the kitchen, and within a few minutes, I hear like a screech, like a crazy loud screech. It sounds like somebody's been really hurt. I start second guessing the whole lock switching thing on the door, and I run in the room, and Sammy comes crying out. And what he says is, "Marshall took my Lego." And I'm like, "No, you're playing with me right now. I thought you were dying. You need to handle the Lego by yourself." But what's going on in his heart is something really interesting. There has been an injustice, a literal unrightness, a not rightness has occurred to him. He was playing with something, legitimately had it first. He's even built it, put some time and energy into it, and it's become this meaningful thing to him. It doesn't mean anything to Marshall, but Marshall really needs that big 4-piece red Lego because he's building something else. So he's bigger and stronger. He snatches it from Sammy, puts it on stuff. And what that does is in Sammy's heart, it's there's like a cry for that to be set right and to be fixed. And him being young, the way that gets expressed as if he's like physically hurt, because woven into human beings is that need and that want, the legitimate need and that want for things to be right. And so let me put it this way as well, and that's so much tied into who God is, because we believe God is a righteous God and a good God, and that he governs the world in a right way. And so even when we read the Proverbs and we read the wisdom books, that's what we get. We get this comforting depiction of a world where the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished. That isn't a bad thing. So, right, listen to Proverbs 10. It really should. It should be a comfort to you, right? And this is what it says. It says, "The memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence." Listen to this one. "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. On the lips of him who has understanding, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks sense. A rich man's wealth is his strong city. The poverty of the poor is their ruin, and the wage of the righteous leads to life." So what the righteous get for their righteous ways is life, but what the wicked gain from their ways is sin. And whoever heeds instructions is on the path to life, but he who rejects reproof, he leads others astray. So you get in Proverbs 10 this depiction of a world where if you do good, that is rewarded by the world itself, by a world that has order and a right way to it, and even in a sense by God himself. And that if you are not walking in a way that has integrity and is good, well, then you reap the fruit of that as well. And so that is a comfort to us because it gives us a bearing that the world is not this crazy place where just anything could happen. And that God is a righteous God and a good God, and that the world He made, His creation, follows suit. And so that's a comforting thing. So here comes the problem. The problem is even depicted in the Bible, in the book of Job that we're currently going through. So the book of Job, we're looking at the hero's journey. We're looking at the journey of Job and Job's development, his calling, the challenge of his life, and then the completion. And so today we're dropping into challenge in a very real way. And so what you're going to find in the book of Job is that Job, even the book of Job, which is in the Bible, is challenging and nuancing, not contradicting, but challenging and nuancing the book of Proverbs, and the way that the book of Proverbs presents a generally ordered world that makes sense, that rewards the right people and punishes the right people. The book of Job brings us to bear with, I think, something that many of us have dealt with, is that in a very specific sense, the world doesn't always go that way. And so that's the way the book of Job opens up, where the reader begins to understand in every way possible that Job is a righteous man. Everything from the things that are said about him in the prologue, just to the number of sons and daughters that he has, and the number of donkeys and sheep that he has. You'll see in Hebraic numerology that all of that is saying he's got 7 sons and 3 daughters. 7 is this Hebraic number that means like completeness and fullness. 3 daughters is 3 is the number of like holiness and rightness. 10, when you put 7 and 3 together, 10 is this number that depicts fullness. So you see the numbers that are playing in, like everything that he has is good and right. Everything that he got was good and right. The ways that he got it were good and right. And he himself is a man who doesn't sin with his lips and has integrity. Like everything about the opening prologue of Job is trying to convince the reader and make the reader understand that Job is a righteous man. Because what's going to happen later in Job is there are going to be his friends who come along and begin to challenge that reality. But you, the reader, need to understand in the opening prologue, like Kyle talked about last week, that Job is indeed a righteous man, that everything he has, he got. It is not unjust gain. He got it in the right way. And so then we get brought into this very unsettling reality. Like even as I read it, it's an unsettling reality that God sees Job as a righteous man, and then still allows, whether you like it or not, God allows and even brings to mind to this figure, the accuser, to this figure in the heavenly courtroom, the adversary, the Satan, the Satan. God brings Job to his attention, and in that bring him to his attention, literally the most mind-blowing and difficult sorts of suffering come upon Job. The loss of his children, the loss of everything that he's worked for. I mean, just like, but for real, feel it. It's a story, but it's trying to make you feel something, that this man did everything the right way. And you guys know that even when you do things the right way, it oftentimes doesn't reward you as quickly as you want. So you even get a man who's done everything the right way, and you're even seeing in the beginning, like he is so attuned to not sinning with his lips, specifically not cursing God by any means for anything, not charging God with wrong for anything at all, that he will go out of his way to make atonement for the sins of his own children who may have accidentally done that thing. And so you see in Job this commitment to do it the right way and to walk in the way, which is what the Psalms and the Proverbs talk about so much. He wants to walk in the way, and he does walk in the way, and his life is rewarded for it. But in a moment, literally in a moment, the things that you never want to have happen to you, all of them happen to him. And he's left in this desolate place. He's left in this place confused about the world, about himself. And then on the heels of that, where I want to go today is you get the bulk of this book of Job. You get the bulk of this book. Most of the chapters in this book, the large majority, are a dialogue between Job's three friends. And here's how they show up. They show up as they show up as really good friends. We jump too quickly to make the friends bad friends. I think that's an error. His friends show up. They see him in the state that he's in. They rip their clothes. And they sit with him for 7 days and don't say a word. I will guarantee you that, I don't say I can guarantee, but I am very, very confident that none of you, or not many of you watching this, have ever seen a friend in distress, showed up and sat with that person for an entire week without saying a word to comfort, without saying a word to reconcile, but just sitting there and being present. So let's not jump too quickly that their friends are just these terrible people, because they really do show up to do the right thing. But as they sit with Job, what we begin to see in the dialogue that progresses, that literally is near 30 chapters of this dialogue, what begins to happen is the friends, in a movement to comfort Job, they have to begin to reconcile something that is not really reconcilable. But they need to reconcile it. And what we see is, in a sense, it looks like they need to reconcile it to comfort themselves, because the life of Job and now the suffering of Job is calling into question what they believe about the world and what they believe about their God. And so the way that they go about reconciling it is they look at God and they say, God must be just. And they have a general belief about the world, which is depicted in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs, as being a right depiction of the world, that the wicked are punished and the righteous are rewarded. So they're looking at this situation, and the only thing they can do to reconcile this situation is to point the finger at Job and say, well, you must have done something wrong. You must have dealt unrighteously. You must have not paid people that you should have paid. You must have oppressed the poor. You must have done these things, or else God wouldn't have done what he did to you. And so what you do see throughout the book of Job is a consistency on Job's part to say back to his friends, I have done nothing to deserve this. And regardless of the theological strain that you're going to come to with the Bible, the prologue of Job is telling you that Job is accurate in those words. He has done nothing to deserve what he got. He's not a perfect human being. That's not in question whether he's a perfect human being. What is made clear by the prologue is that he is a righteous man. And that he has done nothing to deserve what he did get. But that is not okay for his friends to believe. His friends, they can't sit in that reality. And so what they begin to push Job into, what they begin to push at him, is this very thing. God is just. The world that he made has just retribution in it. You get what you deserve. And therefore, if you got this, that means you're unrighteous. That's the only way they can really make sense and comprehend what's going on. So what you find is they have a comforting view of the world that they then try to bring to an afflicted man who has been treated in a way that he should not have been treated. When they bring that comforting general concept to a man who is suffering without cause, it is in fact not a comforting thing to him, because it is what they're trying to deal with is an irreconcilable and incomprehensible concept. And that is, God is just. The world that he made is in fact generally reflecting the way that he is. The problem is it's not always specifically reflecting the way that he is. There are bad things that happen to good people. There is suffering that happens that is not the product of wickedness. And so you, the reader, understand that's what's going on in this book. The friends don't understand that. And so chapter after chapter, they're bringing accusation against Job. So you can begin to feel literally chapters and chapters in. Like just last night, I put Job on Bible Gateway and had Max McLean and his wonderful voice read the book of Job, and just listening to all of that accusation against Job, it got so exhausting. And I'm just listening to the book, much less Job having experienced what he experienced, and then having these friends come and just try to pin him down and nail him to the wall that he is the reason that this whole thing happened, and that he just needs to say that he's the reason this whole thing happened. And so what you have then, if I can sum it up, is there is a person in the heavenly council who wants to accuse Job and push Job to give up and give in to a view of God and the world that is not right. And that view of God and the world that is not right is that God only protects and gives good things to the righteous. And then therefore, the only reason the righteous love him and worship him is for the things that he has. So God is being challenged on his goodness, and he's being challenged on the way that he treats people and the legitimate love that his people return to him. So this heavenly accuser is trying to get Job to give in and give up and drop his place in this scenario through pain and suffering. He's trying to make him give in and give up by causing him to curse God and say that, yes, God, you are in the wrong, and I curse you, and you are not to be worshipped, and you're not good. And then what you have at the earthly level is everyone unaware of that. And so at the earthly level, they're trying to push Job to give up and give in to their view of the world, which I said is not generally wrong, but it's not specifically right in this case either. And they want Job to give up and give in that he is in fact unjust, and that the world is in fact the way that they see it, always giving good to the good and bad to the bad. And they want him to give up and give in. And so what you get in the book of Job is this beautiful depiction of a man who is willing to not fall prey to the accusations in the heavens or on the earth of a depiction of God and a depiction of the world that is not quite right. He's willing to sit in the middle and defend himself rightly and say, no, I haven't done anything to deserve this, but that doesn't mean I'm going to lob accusation back at God either. And so he sits in the middle and he endures the suffering that was on account of this heavenly figure. And then he endures the suffering that's on account of his earthly friends. And he endures it by just staying where he is and staying present to the things that he has believed his entire life. And he stays present and engaged and doesn't give up and give in by pulling out of that engagement with his friends, and without pulling out of that relationship that he carries with the God that he's followed his entire life. And so you get this beautiful depiction of this endurance of Job to stay present and stay in it, and not pull out and not give up and give in to low levels of wisdom that can't comprehend all that God is doing in this world. So is God a just God? Yes. Is that all that God is? Absolutely not. That is not all that he is. And is God trying to establish righteousness on the earth with the bringing about of his kingdom? Yes, he is. Is that all that he is doing? I don't think that's all that he is doing. He is doing something bigger even than that. And it has to do with his relationship with the human beings that he's made, and not just the relationship, but what he's inviting human beings to become. And so the book of Job, and our lives that in some way, probably in smaller ways, reflect the book of Job, the times when we suffer and receive accusation for things that don't seem to be quite right, and they don't seem to be quite true, or we experience things that are impossible and they feel impossible to overcome. We experience those things, and they really do challenge our view of the world, and challenge our view of the one who made it. It really brings me to this place of like trying to comprehend why why this incomprehensible world? Like why this heavenly figure? Why does he even get a role in this thing? Why does even in the simplest way, me and Lauren were talking about this the other day, why does Jesus come once with the power to set everything right, and instead of setting everything right, he dies on a cross, ascends to the right hand of the Father, and then literally lets the world continue to play out in its unrightness, promising that it will come to rightness, but having the power to stop suffering, having the power to set things back to the way they ought to be, and looking as if he doesn't do that thing. Like, why the incomprehensibility of that? Like, why a world that is that way? Why not just fix it? Why not, when Jesus came the first time, just go about healing everybody and going about bringing down those who have corrupt power? Why not bring down all the corrupt power structures? Why not just go do that? Why do what he did and then leave us in a world that still isn't fixed, but with the promise of him being with us, which is a comfort. But when you're literally in the midst of, I think, what Job is in the middle of, and what many of you, I think, are in the middle of, why in the middle of an incomprehensible world does God ask this of us? And when I say ask this of us, which is stay in a world that has suffering. Don't blame me for the suffering. Don't curse me for the suffering, but don't give up and give in to what the suffering tells you about the world and about me. But I'm not going to end it, even though I can right now. Like, why does he ask and invite that sort of thing? That's a question that's hard to wrestle with. And one of the things that I think I've learned through living in this world, for, the 35 years that I've been in it, is that God is doing something, like I said earlier, with human beings, that's bigger than just setting the world right. He's doing something in human beings that you might think is incomprehensible. He is refashioning human beings in his image. They were created in his image, and that image has been marred. And now he is in the process of refashioning. And I would go as far as to say this: in what ways is he refashioning? Well, he is refashioning you and me to become like he is. So in that famous 1 Corinthians 13 explication of love, it tells you what love is, how it's patient and it's kind and it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. You know what the last couple things that it says, and actually the very last thing it says is love bears all things, love believes all things, and then here is the last thing that says, love endures all things. How does a God, and this is where we need to grab onto for a minute, our God is a God who is of love, but being a God of love has endured all things. He has endured the destruction of a world that he absolutely loves. He has endured the violence of man on man that he loves, both the violent man and the one who has been treated violently. And he loves deeply those who he has called to himself, sacrificed himself for, and then who oftentimes don't act in a way that he is. And he loves them and endures the unrighteousness of men, endures the unbelief of men, endures the, how can I put it this way? The disgusting things that humans do when no one's looking, out of fear and greed. He endures it without crushing it and bringing it to an end, even though I'm sure he wants to. And the reason he endures it is because he loves. How does a God like that produce that same sort of compulsion in those sorts of beings? And I would argue that this is part of that. I love my wife 1,000 times more than I did 7 years ago, 10 years ago. I love her an exponential amount more. And do you want to know the reason why I love her an exponential amount more? The first reason is this. We spent the first 3 to 4 years of our marriage in a cycle of argument that never seemed that it would come to an end. There would be days where I would go out of my way to serve her, to affirm her, to love her. We would lay down in bed. She would look at me and almost with tears in her eyes say, "I don't feel loved by you." Then there were days that I really wasn't present. I really wasn't there. I was, focused on finishing school and focused on work and wasn't present. And then we'd lay down and she'd say, "Oh, I just don't feel loved by you." So then I would gather my strength again and I would try better the next day, the next couple of days. And I would try to be intentional, lay down. I just don't feel loved by you. I don't feel understood by you. And so what began to happen in the midst of that is who she was, her inconsistencies and her failings were coming up against my inconsistencies and my weaknesses and my failings. And we're saying to each other, we're not going anywhere. And yet we don't get each other. We don't understand each other. We don't know how to connect with each other. And it is excruciatingly painful to be vulnerable with a person who doesn't understand you, doesn't get you, and doesn't know really what's going on with you. And then when you do expose what's going on at the vulnerable level, all it causes is reaction, and it causes fear. And so what really, there were so many times where I would leave that situation in a rage, hop on my little bicycle. I had a little BMX in college. It was kind of silly. I was big. It was small. And I would hop on that bike and I would just pedal as fast as I could, in a sense, just running away from a reality that I couldn't reconcile. I do love her. I don't love her perfectly. I can't convince her of that. And I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of trying. So I'd ride my little bicycle until I was so tired, and it wasn't really taking me that far anyway. I would turn around, I'd ride it back home, and I would just come back to the table, and I would come back to her and say, I don't quite know what to do to fix it. I am going to continue to try, and I am going to ask you to, one, be patient, and also begin to recognize if there is a burden that you're putting on me that perhaps I can't fulfill. And we need to come together to figure this out. And so what happened is I grew in love through the difficulty of staying present in a situation that was excruciating. And so I'd put it this way: the way that love is crafted in a human being, not in every sense, but in a very real sense, love is forged in the fire of suffering while staying present and believing the good. That is a way that love is made. It is crafted. It is birthed in human beings, because human beings do not naturally love in an enduring sort of way that 1 Corinthians 13 talks about, and that God is in his world. And so as I understand it, some of the things that go on in this world that make us feel like we have to sit in a place that doesn't make sense, while at the same time tell God, you are good, and yet this world that you made doesn't seem to be right, and you're still good, and I'm not charging you with wrong, and I'm still going to follow you, and I'm still going to love you. Staying present and staying with a mind that is not willing to fall into the earthly accusations or the spiritual accusations, but staying present to the commitment that you made when you decided to follow Jesus, staying committed to that being, and staying committed to the way that he talks about himself, the way that he talks about the world, and the way that he talks about you. Staying committed in that, even when it doesn't make sense, is the way that love is birthed in you, and you become a being who can bear all things, who can believe all things, and who can endure all things, which is not an easy thing, but it is a necessary thing if we are going to take on the character of the one who made us, and if in fact we are going to share the rulership of this good world with Jesus as we, his bride, sit next to him and be like he is to rule the world like he would. And so he is fashioning us to become that as long as we're willing to stay present in the midst of the suffering and let that forging fire play its work out. And so in the name of Jesus, I once again bless you with the strength and vitality of mind to do that very thing, to stay present and stay in it with the people that God has put you around right now, with your children when they act wild and crazy and unyielding and completely ungrateful for everything that you do, and they don't recognize a thing, and they don't get it, and they don't understand what you're doing, and they don't know how to show any sort of gratitude. And our Father in heaven wants to produce love in you by you staying present at eye level with them, on the ground with them, expending your energy with them. It's a huge thing. He wants to draw you into that, into your marriage. In those times when you want to give up and run away and pedal your little bicycle down the street as fast as you can, he is inviting something new that does not currently exist in you to be birthed in you when you just turn back around and stay present. In the relationships that you have with your friends where they don't get you and they don't understand you, he's inviting that same thing for love to be birthed in a new way through that commitment. And so I bless you in the name of Jesus for what you have in front of you in your workplace to that end, to the businesses that you own that require that thing, to the endeavors that you're in that require that thing, to the schoolwork that you have to do that requires that thing, to you looking out at the world in general and requires that thing to stay present. God, I bless you in the name of Jesus to stay there and be there. We love you. I love you. Do that with us and do that for us for the sake of our church, for the sake of Nacogdoches, for the sake of the world, and for the sake of your own heart.